So you asked a straight question. Simple, clear, the kind that deserves a straight answer. You weren't asking for the world, or starting a fight. You just wanted to know something. Something that was completely reasonable to want to know. And let me ask you, what did you get? A non-answer. As a matter of fact, you usually get a subject change, or a sudden problem that needed dealing with right now. Funny how that works. Maybe a long complicated explanation that used a lot of words, and somehow said absolutely nothing. Or their favorite thing to turn it around, and suddenly you were the one explaining yourself. Classic. And you sat there, trying to follow the thread, trying to find the actual answer somewhere in the noise, replaying what they said. Chaotically checking if you missed something, wondering if you asked it wrong, maybe you came across too aggressive, maybe the timing was off, maybe you should try again later when things are calmer. Of course, that never-ending maybe. Listen, here's what actually happened. There was no answer coming. Not then, not later, not ever. Because giving you a straight answer would have meant giving you something solid to stand on. And solid ground was the last thing they wanted you to have. Confused people don't leave. Confused people stay and keep trying to figure it out. They give you more time, more patience, more benefit of the doubt. Confused people blame themselves. The thing is, you blamed yourself, didn't you? Spent time thinking about how you could ask it better next time, how you could make it easier for them to open up, how you could create the right environment for an honest conversation. How thoughtful of you. Bravo. And they watched you work that hard to get something they had absolutely no intention of giving you. An answer. So let's go back to the first time you noticed it. You asked something. Not heavy, not loaded, just something you needed clarity on. Something that in any normal situation would have gotten a normal response. And instead of just answering, they dodged a redirect. An answer that technically responded to what you said but somehow left you with nothing. And you noticed, but just for a second. That flicker of, wait, they didn't actually answer what I asked. But you let it go because they seemed genuine, because pushing felt unnecessary over something that small. So you filed it under. They probably just didn't understand what I was asking. Next time I'll have to be clearer. So next time you were clearer. And guess what? They were vaguer. More words this time, longer explanation, lots of feeling and context, and backstory that circled around the actual point without ever landing on it. And you sat there nodding, genuinely trying to understand. Because that's what you do. You listen, you try, you give people room to express themselves. Very noble of you, genuinely. Except what you were actually doing was accepting fog as an answer. And every time you accepted it, you told them, this works, keep going, they're still here, still listening, still trying to understand. I already told you how I feel about this. Did they though? Because you were there and you don't remember getting an answer. You remember words, lots of words. You remember the conversation going sideways and ending with you comforting them. But an actual answer. A clear, direct, this is where I stand answer. Nothing. Never. The first dodge wasn't even obvious, and that's what makes it so effective. It looked like communication. At least had the shape of it. Two people talking, looked fine from the outside, felt slightly off from the inside. You overrode the slightly off part. Because you didn't want to be the person who turns everything into a confrontation over a conversation that looked perfectly fine. But that is only on the surface. So you tried again. And again they delivered a whole lot of nothing, wrapped in just enough words to make it look like something. And you unwrapped it carefully, respectfully, looking for the answer inside. But guess what? There wasn't one, there was never going to be one. But you didn't know that yet, you just thought you hadn't found the right way to ask. So you kept trying. Adorable, really. And then without realizing it you started changing how you asked things. You got more careful and more strategic. You'd think about the wording before you opened your mouth. Think about the timing, think about how to make it easier for them to just answer. Like the problem was your delivery, and not their deliberate refusal to be straight with you. You started doing research on your own relationship. Filling in the gaps they left with your own guesses, your own logic, your own best explanation for their behavior. Because they weren't giving you anything to work with, so you just made it work yourself. And that kept you busy, didn't it? Kept your head full. Kept you focused on figuring them out instead of figuring out what was actually going on. Listen, that was the point. A confused person doesn't have the mental space to step back and see the full picture. A confused person is too busy trying to solve the puzzle to notice the puzzle was designed to never be solved. You weren't failing to find the answer. There was no answer to find. Just enough fog to keep you searching. And you searched. Thoroughly. For way too long. So here's what was actually happening while you were busy trying to ask better questions. They were maintaining control, not loudly, not obviously. Just enough to keep you in a permanent state of not quite knowing, not quite sure, not quite having enough to make a decision. And that state, that specific uncomfortable in-between place, that's exactly where they needed you. Because clarity is dangerous for people like them. Clarity gives you options, clarity lets you make decisions based on reality instead of guesswork. Clarity means you might actually look at the situation for what it is and decide you're done. And they couldn't have that, could they? So they kept the fog thick. Every direct question got a detour, every simple conversation somehow ended up somewhere else entirely. Every time you got close to something solid they introduced just enough noise to pull you off track. And you followed the noise. Every single time, because you genuinely thought the answer was in there somewhere if you just listened hard enough. Funny thing is, it wasn't. You always twist my words. Oh, that's a good one. You ask a straight question, they avoid it, you point out they avoided it, and suddenly you're the one with the problem. Suddenly you're the one who can't communicate properly. Suddenly the conversation is about your tone, your approach, your inability to just have a normal conversation without making everything so difficult. Masterful, really. Genuinely impressive. Because now you're defending yourself instead of waiting for your answer. Now you're explaining how you didn't mean it like that. Now you're managing their feelings about the way you asked instead of getting what you actually needed. And your original question stayed still unanswered. Just buried somewhere under all that noise you both just made. And they walk away clean. This is the pattern. Dodge, redirect, flip, bury. Consistent enough to be deliberate, varied enough to look accidental. And you kept engaging with it like each conversation was a fresh start. Like this time would be different. Like if you just approached it right, they'd finally just tell you the truth. But here's the thing, they were never going to tell you the truth. Truth was the one thing they were protecting the entire time. Everything else, the words, the explanations, the emotional detours, all of it, was just infrastructure built around keeping the truth exactly where they wanted it. Away from you. And while you were out there asking better questions, choosing better timing, finding better words, they were just living in the answer. Comfortably. Knowing exactly what was going on, knowing exactly why they wouldn't tell you. And watching you try to figure it out. You worked so hard, for absolutely nothing. So now you see it. Not a communication problem, not two people who just couldn't get on the same page. Someone who decided keeping you confused was better than being straight with you. That's it, that's the whole thing. Simple, isn't it? Almost embarrassingly simple. You asked clearly, you listened, you gave them every possible chance to just say the thing. And they looked you in the eye and handed you fog. Every single time. And you accepted it. Every single time. Because here's the part you don't want to sit with. The confusion wasn't just something they created. You maintained it, you chose it. Every time the fog cleared just enough for you to see what was actually there, you looked away. You went back to trying to understand them instead of accepting what you already understood. Clarity was available. You weren't ready for it. Or you didn't want to see it. Maybe you still don't want it. Because clarity meant deciding. And deciding meant no more excuses, no more waiting, no more maybe it's not what it looks like. Confusion was uncomfortable, but it was safe. It kept you from having to do the hard thing. From facing the truth. They fed you fog, yeah. But you were hungry for it. And now you're not. So what you do with that now is completely yours.